Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching telly.
Lastly, two names emerged. The bookie's favourite, Sajid Javid. Matthew?
Well, it would be a bit of a plonking choice, you know, a problem over people of colour being deported to make a person of colour the Home Secretary. He's a capable man, and I think a basically liberal-minded man. So it would be quite good to see him there, but it's a slightly unimaginative choice.
The people's choice, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
My laughter has a desperate tinge.
You're not a fan, lastly, Matthew.
No, he's crazy.
Matthew Paris, thank you.
Danny, hello, Danny in Epsom, hi.
Hey, Sheila, if anything, I thought you were slightly to the left, aren't you?
I'm all over the place politically, Danny, to be honest.
Yeah, I listen quite regularly, but what I was going to say is I think Moron was actually a good MP, and I think I'm sad to see it go. When you look at the alternatives on the other side, that certainly is frightening. But the reason that you'll never detoxify this issue is because lots and lots of people are pro-immigration, but that's not what we've had. In less than one man's lifetime, we've had, you know, complete social and population change. I mean, I looked at the census of 1951 the other week. We'd already had a year's worth of mass immigration from the Windrush Islands and India, and it was still 98.6% people spoke English, they were white, and they were broadly Christian. So in less than one lifetime from that point, we've had, you know, total radical change, and against most people's wishes. You know, we were never asked if we wanted it. It's been shoved down our throats. And my worry is that a Labour government gets in and opens the floodgates even further like they did before.
Well, I think I don't necessarily agree with everything you've just said in terms. I mean, you know, it may.
It's all true.
No, all right. Well, listen, it may be your lived experience of what immigration is, but many people have welcomed immigration as well. You know, I'm just saying that socially, it's not always a bad story. That's all I'm saying. Clearly, there are problems, but that's all I'm saying. But as to whether Labour, if they got in, would do things differently, I suspect, given that Jeremy Corbyn is the leader of Labour at the moment, then I suspect they would be doing things differently, not least in response to public opinion, because it matters. It just matters. And as Theresa May said last week in the Commons, we are being tough on immigration. You know, you might have a difficulty with how she's going about it. You might not. We're being tough on immigration because the British public have told us to be.
Yeah, she's absolutely right. And most people, I would say, think like me. I know that in inner cities in London, you've got the new London types there. My sort of family have been moving out for 60 years, but the new London types would probably disagree with me now. They're not.
Well, there's a whole country out there as well, Danny, remember?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. And most people are saying, look, we don't mind immigration in low numbers so people can assimilate and absorb into the mass populace, but that's not what we've been having. And most people are like me, we were never asked. And we're saying that legitimately out loud. I'm not a racist at all. But I'm saying this is not what we wanted. And it's fair to say that, and I think the government are listening to us, but I think we want a hostile environment. I'd say make it more hostile. You know, I want this problem sorted out.
Hang on a sec. What would making it more hostile achieve? Or you just want heavy-handed?
Yeah, definitely.
Really?
I think if you do a Twitter poll, or I ask people generally. Twitter's a bit on the left, but I just ask people generally. To be honest with you, I want the government to get a grip of this issue because it's been out of control basically for all of my life.
Do you accept that the hostile environment approach and the very term hostile environment, and that's not a Tory term, you know, this problem goes back a long way. Do you accept that is what led, in some instances, to Windrush citizens being threatened with deportation and losing their jobs? Because there is a tendency still, it might not be yours, but there is a tendency still to equate immigration with brown faces.
Yeah, but only inadvertently. I think it was a mistake. Even people on the right would say this is a mistake, you know. And I hate the way that every day people conflate the two. Listen, that was a terrible mistake, and the Tories have paid a price. However, the population want them to get a grip.
Yeah, but
you know,
what I'm saying is, if you create an even more hostile environment, presumably you're supportive of deportation targets as well, are you?
Absolutely, I think most people are. And
all right. Well, don't presume most people think the way you do, Danny. They might. I don't know. But let's neither of us presume that most people think anything. When it comes to targets, I don't mean immigration targets, I mean deportation targets. Can you see that when there is an impetus to remove people, it's almost inevitable that legal migrants or undocumented people who we should document and welcome in this country will be thrown out in the rush?
I don't think it'll happen again. This Windrush whole scandal was very kind of niche. You know, people have lived all these years, they didn't have any kind of papers. I mean, of course, that was wrong.
No, they didn't have them because they didn't need them. And then suddenly they needed them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a mistake. It's a hands-up moment, isn't it? It's obvious. So, I mean, everybody across party, virtually everyone listening would agree with that. However, I do want a more hostile environment. You think there's thousands of people trying to get into this country illegally every single day.
How about we change the language? Just indulge me a minute. Instead of thinking about we want a more hostile environment to get rid of illegal immigrants, why don't we think about having a better functioning Home Office that does it? You've got a new Home Secretary saying, we'll be respectful, we'll be fair. That doesn't sound like a hostile environment. But what about just being good at your job, please?
Do you know what, Sheila? There's so many hundreds of thousands of people trying to get in every year. You could probably quadruple the workforce, and it would still be difficult to get a grip. This is why I think you need to use force or deport entire families and things like that, because you need to get a bit nasty. If every time you get on a lorry and you get caught, and you caught 4 or 5 times, you just go back and try again. If every time you got caught you got a right-hander, you might not. You might settle in France.
All right, well, you're espousing violence now, so we'll leave it there. Danny, thank you, Danny in Epsom.
What on earth is Labour's policy on illegal immigrants? James from Manchester, have you got the answer?
Hello, Nigel.
Hello.
Very nice to talk to you. Nigel, I'm absolutely dumbfounded. I watched that interview this morning, and the most frightening thing to me as a person is that this woman potentially could be the actual Home Secretary. If you look between all the spin, the question was, and I watched it, and Piers Morgan actually challenged her at least 5, if not 6 times.
6 times we counted, James. 6 times.
Yeah, and what you've got to do with this is he quite cleverly, because he's very good at what he does, and he quite cleverly sort of put to one side the Windrush scandal, and he said no. And if you listen to the terminology, he actually said to this woman, do you agree with deporting illegal immigrants?
Yeah.
You can wrap it up any way you want, but that's what I was actually asking her. And she refused point blank to answer it. She refused point blank for 6 times to answer it. And this is what is frightening. It is absolutely frightening to this country that we could have a potential Home Secretary that would actually not deport anybody that is coming here that is criminal, a murderer, a rapist, a child rapist. Basically, Labour's policy is to not deport anybody. What their policy is to have a open policy.
Well, James, we're all citizens of the world, you know.
No, what they're trying to do, do you know what, Nigel? I've put this on my media account earlier today, and I've got an awful lot of followers, trust me, and I've put it on my media account today. What Diane Abbott, Corbyn, McDonnell, Thorne in my side, Thornbury, all the rest of them, what they're trying to do is they're trying to continue the continuation of LIBOR, as I call them, Labour's policy of importing this kind of third world migrant generation that basically will live off benefits forever in their entire existence and give Labour the vote to make...
Well, that's a very cynical interpretation, James, but you're not alone in thinking that. James, your opinion, very, very clear. I want to hear some Diane Abbott supporters out there. Come and tell me that actually the Labour Party have taken the high moral ground over Windrush, and that's all that really matters. Let's ask Charlotte in the Forest of Dean. Good evening, Charlotte.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, what is Labour's policy, and indeed, what's the right policy towards illegal immigrants?
Well, I mean, it's interesting to hear that Diane Abbott on the television saying that there has to be caps for illegal immigration. Yeah. Meanwhile, they're trying to defend a load of illegal immigrants that were in Grenfell, which is kind of a bit of, neither one side or the other. You can't say that you're going to have caps and then want to keep a load of illegal immigrants in the country, because that's just, contradictory to what you've already said.
Yeah, I don't know what percentage of Grenfell people were illegal, but certainly there were some, Charlotte, and I do understand that point. But is it? I mean, are Labour just trying to say, look, we're the nice people? We're nice because we're kind to people, and these Tories are horrid. And in some ways, the Windrush fiasco, which is an administrative mess-up, has given them the opportunity to do this.
But they're not nice people. There's rampant anti-Semitism within the party, and to be quite honest with you, they race bait as much as anyone that I have seen in this country. It's full of people like Abbott, who to me is just someone who's a race baiter.
Well, but in some ways, Charlotte, she's winning, isn't she? She and Lemmy are winning because they've got the Conservative Party reeling on this issue. I mean, there's almost nobody, it seems to me now, in the Conservative cabinet standing up making the arguments that were made in the referendum about having proper border controls controlling those coming into our country. They've all run away, Charlotte. They're scared.
Yeah, but they're all, I mean, whichever colour of party you have in the Parliament, they're all the same thing. They're all New Labour. Whichever colour, they all are basically have the same common purpose. They all want open borders. They all want mass immigration. They don't want to do anything about illegal immigration, and they want to continue that by taking in more refugees. So really, what we have at the moment are parties with exactly the same policies.
And none of them,
what colour they are, and they're all New Labour. They're all
none of them,
Labour Blairite policies.
None of them, Charlotte, want to be criticised. None of them want to go to that dinner party in Notting Hill and get looked at in a certain way because they've dared talk about immigration. It's just too awful. Thank God that awful Farage chap is not leading UKIp anymore. That's what they say. Let's go to George from Ebware, a first-time caller of the show. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Nigel. I watched that interview this morning.
Yep.
Yet another car crash. I mean, how this woman is in this job, I wouldn't employ her in my business to be a toilet cleaner. She is absolutely clueless.
Did you laugh, George, or did you shake your head? Or I mean, what?
No, I was just, I didn't laugh. It's not a laughing matter. It's a serious matter. This woman could be the Home Secretary of this country. It is a terrifying thought. We've got her, Corbyn and McDonnell are completely economically illiterate. We could have these people running our country. Now, I did actually question, have you heard of the Barnet Alliance?
Go on, I haven't. Go on, tell me.
They are affiliated to Labour, and very much so to Corbyn. And we spoke about figures, and I've got no problem with immigration. I said, well, what sort of figures would you like? Unlimited. He said, well, we went all the way through I said, what about 50 million then? No problem. Well, you're going to put 50 million people, there's loads of that. This is what they want. They want completely... Labour, they know they've lost the northern working classes. They've lost them. So they're going to fill the country with immigrants to vote for them. And they will vote for them. Then it's not daft, but, I hate the thought of that man running this country.
Well, it could happen, George. George, just let me ask you very quickly, what would you like to see government policy be towards illegal immigrants?
Well, if they're illegal, by the sheer word, that means they shouldn't be here.
Quite right.
Let me ask you, how are these people living?
Well, they're living in sheds, they're working in the black economy, taking cash, etc., and there's a lot of it. Migration Watch say 1.1 million illegal migrants in the country. Some others say 2 million, some say many more than that. George, I thank you very much for your call. And JM sends me a very funny text. He says, if Diane Abbott hasn't got a clue, then how the hell do you expect me to know? Because I'm asking you what their policy may be. Let's go to John in Hailsham. Good evening, John.
Yeah, good evening, Nigel. Well, I think the obvious hard facts are that the Labour haven't got any legitimate policies on illegal immigrants living in Britain right now. And I think Diane Abbott is simply trying to capitalise on Theresa May's latest problems. Obviously, we have got at least a minimum of 150,000 people overstaying on their visas, and say people illegally living in Britain right now.
Yep.
And clearly and obviously, these people do need to be, to be taken out of the country. We have major problems on housing and health problems.
So isn't it funny, John, given the logic of what you've just said, that when Amber Rudd, as Home Secretary, was asked, what are your targets, what are you doing, she said there are no targets. It seems on neither of the front benches is there any genuine resolve to deal with this issue.
I think this is a major problem. I mean, what it is political correctness just gone absolutely mad. I mean, obviously, clearly, the only logical thing, if we've got, thousands of illegal people living in Britain, they should be deported. There's no two ways about that. But political correctness is preventing this from happening. And, I don't think Labour or the Tory party have got a clue what to do about the problems they've created.
Nor do I, John.
50 years.
No, John, and you're right. They have created this, and that's a point that they seem to run away from. Nobody ever holds them to account. John and Helsham just did. Thank you.
Charles is in Enfield to kick us off. Charles, what do you think?
Hi, James. Look, I think that you've slightly gone off. You're asking the wrong question.
OK, but you'll understand that you have to answer the ones I'm asking.
I'll answer it. Yes, of course.
So are you cross about how much power the House of Commons has?
The question is... Am I cross about the power that Parliament has? Parliament, yes, is sovereign, but it gets its power from the people.
So are you cross about the amount of power that Parliament has?
Well, I'll be certainly cross if Parliament's able to usurp the power that the people have invested in.
Who elected the House of Commons?
Who elected the House of Commons?
It's an echo.
Well, look, the people voted for Brexit.
Who elected the House of Commons?
Look, well, we know who elected the House of Commons.
Well, no, I just need you to say the words.
Who elected the House of Commons?
Yes.
The House of Commons has been lent power. It is lent
Who elected
power
it?
By the people.
Who?
The people
elected the House of Commons.
They lend power.
And the House of Lords reminded, I suppose, constitutional experts last night that the House of Commons exists to keep checks and balances upon the executive, the Prime Minister. So the power that was exercised by the House of Lords yesterday was essentially a reminder of the power that resides in the House of Commons, which is, of course, elected by the people. So why are you cross that Parliament has so much power?
Because it would appear...
Oh, so you are cross that Parliament has so much power?
I'll certainly be cross if Parliament...
And were you previously of the view that Parliament's powers had somehow been transported to Brussels?
Yes, absolutely.
So where's all this power come from now that's in Westminster today?
Well,
Is that the power that's come back from Brussels, or is that just power that we didn't know about before we voted to leave the European Union because we thought all the power was in Brussels? It's like new power that we found under the bed.
Well, Parliament is assuming it is taking... this could be an attempt to take away power from the people. Brexit was an expression of the populace. Brexit was an expression of
No, but it wasn't, was it? Because 17.4 million people voted for something, but if you could find three people, one who voted to be like Norway, because prominent campaigners said we'd be like Norway, one who voted because they believed Owen Paterson when he said only a madman is talking about leaving the single market, then you'd have somebody who didn't vote for the same as the person who thought that we were going to be like Norway. Then you'd have someone who believed Daniel Hannan when he said that EU citizens' rights in this country will not be affected in any way, and they voted for it because they believed him. So that's three positions that are all completely different from each other. Then you've got people who believe David Davis when he said that we'd be doing trade deals in Germany the morning after the results. So anyone who believed David Davis voted for something different from what anyone who believed Daniel Hannan voted for, something different from what anyone who listened to Liam Fox voted for, something different from anyone who listened to anyone who suggested that Norway and Switzerland provided models. So we can all agree that the idea that 17-odd million people all voted for the same thing is absurd to the point of ridiculousness. So this phrase... Well, no, it is, because there's no way anyone who voted to be like Norway voted to leave the customs union and the single market, is there, Charles?
people vote.
You have to answer my questions at some point, mate. Is there any way that somebody who voted to be like Norway, because that's what they were told we were going to be like, could be described as having voted to leave the customs union and the single market?
Oh, that's very dishonest. That's very dishonest.
Could you just answer the question? I voted Brexit because I believed the campaigners who said we will be like Norway. I voted Brexit because I believed Owen Paterson when he said nobody is talking about leaving the single market, okay? Now we're being told that we will leave the customs union and the single market under hard Brexit. Could you possibly, I mean, I don't want to be rude, but you do understand how the person who voted to be like Norway did not vote to leave the customs union and the single market?
I'm sorry, James, but...
I'm sorry too, but I just a yes or a no, because I'm essentially asking you whether 2 + 2 = 4, and the fact that you don't want to answer speaks volumes, Charles.
No, look, James...
No, look, Charles, if I voted to be like Norway, did I vote to leave the customs union and the single market?
If you voted for Brexit, you voted to leave the customs union...
No, but I was told we wouldn't have to. I was told we could be like Switzerland. That's why I voted Brexit. So how can you claim that the person who voted to be like Switzerland is the same as the person who voted to leave the customs union and the single market? How could you claim that the person that believed David Davis when he said we'd be doing deals in Germany on the morning after the referendum voted to leave the single market without a trade deal? How could you, if you believed Owen Paterson when he said that absolutely only a madman would leave the single market and you voted for Brexit because you liked Owen Paterson, how can you now turn around to them and say you knowingly voted to do the opposite of what you voted to do? I mean, that's dishonest, Charles.
No, what I think you're doing is now trying to completely invalidate the vote.
No, I'm not at all. I'm pointing out that 17-odd million people voted for very different things, and to claim now that they all voted for the same thing is to treat the British public like idiots, and I'm uncomfortable letting anyone do that, whether it's a caller to this programme or a cabinet minister.
Well, I don't accept...
So let's just recap then. Are you here to argue that somebody who voted to leave the European Union because they believed either that we could be like Norway, or that we could be like Switzerland, or that only a madman would talk about leaving the single market, or that we'd be doing trade deals with the Germans on the morning after the result, or that it would be the easiest deal in human history? So anyone who voted for it because they believed any of those 5 positions, and we both know I could go on for ages and possibly come up with 500 different positions, are you here to tell me that actually, without realising it, all of those people voted for the same thing, Charles?
I am saying they all voted to leave, and you can't...
No, Charles, are you telling me that they all voted for the same thing? I voted to leave on the understanding that we would be like Norway. Now you're telling me we can't be anything like Norway. Are you still telling me that I voted for what you're telling me I voted for?
People voted for something.
Now, this feeling you've got inside now, that frustration you feel at the facts being laid out in front of you, that's called cognitive dissonance. And what makes you still cling to the notion that 17-odd million people voted for the same thing, despite having it very politely and intelligently explained to you how easy it is to prove that millions of them voted for completely different things from each other, that's the point at which you have to ask yourself what it is you think you're going to win. That's when you use a word like control, and then I come back to my original question, which is why are you so cross that Parliament actually has so much control, Charles?
I'm cross that you're now trying to dissect...
Damn dissections, eh? Why can't we just go with the simple slogans instead of complicated understanding? Dissections actually show you how things work instead of just letting you look at posters.
You cannot dissect every
I just did, Charles.
Of a vote.
I just did, mate. And the answer to the question that you're not prepared to answer is, James, of course I'm not dishonest or stupid enough to argue that somebody who voted Brexit in the belief that we'd be like Norway actually voted to be the opposite of Norway. Because you can't say that out loud, Charles, because then you'd realise how silly you sound.
James, you cannot go breaking down votes.
No, God damn it, that you would actually dissect something to find out how it works. Charles, I mean, that would be insane, wouldn't it? So, final chance, are you really here to tell us that somebody who voted to leave the European Union because they thought we could be like Norway or Switzerland actually voted to be nothing like Norway or Switzerland at all? And I'm going to insist on a yes or no.
I'm sorry, that is a trick question. They voted for...
It is not a trick question, Charles. You just can't answer it. John's in Sunbury. John, what would you like to say?
James, you've been a bit uncomplimentary about David Davis and Liam Fox this morning.
No, I haven't. I've described things they said.
Yes, you have. You've slagged them off quite badly.
No, I haven't.
Now, let's have a look at who's running the union.
No, let's not. Let's examine what you've just said. What did I say about David Davis that isn't demonstrably true and on the record?
Well, let's look at...
No, mate. You can't come on and say things. The whole point is...
about that, obviously.
The whole point is, I challenge what people say. So what did I say about David Davis that is not on the record and demonstrably true, John?
Well, you said, he wants to do a trade deal with Germany, and the next day...
He tweeted it.
Very well he couldn't do.
He tweeted that. There were 4 separate tweets talking about what would happen on the morning after the referendum result. We will be in Germany negotiating not with Brussels, but with Berlin. Right, so next example then?
Let's have a look at who's running the EU.
No, John, let's have a look at you saying that I slagged off David Davis and Liam Fox. So, first example failed. Next example?
Complimentary about them.
Next example?
Sorry?
Next example?
Say that again, sorry?
The next example of me saying something about them that isn't demonstrably true.
You said, you've been very uncomplimentary about these guys.
No, I've reminded you of things they said.
You're quite happy to be quite content with the likes of Juncker and Tusk.
John, we need you to prove the things that I said about Davis and Fox that aren't true and on the record, because every single thing I said this morning is true and on the record, John. So if you're going to come on and the first thing you're going to say is not true, it means you've kind of undermined everything that you say afterwards. So I'm giving you a really good opportunity to prove that what you said was true. What have I said about David Davis or Liam Fox that isn't published on the record?
Right, no. What you did say about David Davis, it may have been true.
It's not slagging him off then, is it?
Well, yeah, you're putting him down, really.
No, mate, I'm reminding you of the words he used to convince you to vote to leave the European Union, words that turned out to be untrue.
All I can say to you, when Brexit proves to be a success...
What will success look like, John?
...becomes untenable. Do you understand that?
Yes, mate, of course it does.
Yeah,
what does success look like? What does success look like?
Well, out of the EU, not being governed by Germany.
How does Germany govern us? If today's whole phone-in is about the House of Lords delivering power to the House of Commons, where did Germany come into that?
You mean about the coffin dodgers in the House of Lords?
Oh, hang on, I thought you were uncomfortable with people being rude.
Well, yeah, I'll be rude about them.
Okay, you be rude as you want. So just talk me through how Germany influeed the vote in the House of Lords yesterday.
Germany run the EU?
Yeah, so how did they deliver that verdict in the House of Lords yesterday?
Who said they did? I didn't.
You did. You said Germany governs us.
Yeah, Germany governs the EU.
So how did Germany make the decision to pass that amendment in the House of Lords yesterday?
Yes.
So how did Germany make the decision to pass that amendment in the House of Lords, John?
Let me talk.
John, I can't let you talk twaddle, mate. It embarrasses you and it insults my listeners. How did Germany govern it?
Your position with BC becomes untenable when...
The word is untenable, John.
Do you understand that?
I know what untenable means. I don't know what intenable means, no.
Untenable. Well, you know what I'm getting at. Your position with...
So let's try once more, John. How did Germany deliver that amendment in the House of Lords yesterday?
Germany did not deliver that amendment yesterday.
But they govern us.
Germany...
But they govern us.
...run the EU.
But they govern us.
Yeah, but most...
So if they govern us, how did the House of Lords pass that amendment yesterday, giving power to the House of Commons? Where did Germany come into it?
Germany rule the EU. Everything done in the EU suits Germany.
Right.
Okay?
Yes, John.
And you know the House of Lords, James, most of those people in the House of Lords have either worked for the EU or are currently still working for the EU.
Okay, so here's what we'll do. We'll come back after the break, John, and we'll have a list of everybody in the House of Lords, and we'll start with the A's and we'll work right through to the Z's, and you tell me which ones used to work for the European Union.
For example,
and then we'll count them, John. We'll count them, and you have to prove that more than half of them worked for the European Union. Do you want to accept that challenge?
Yeah, I could do. Yeah, most of them are still on fat pensions.
So I'm going to come back after the news with a list of everyone in the House of Lords. There's hundreds of people, and you're going to tell me which ones worked for the European Union, and at the end of that process, you're going to be able to prove that it's more than half of them, John, because you said most.
I would say that, yes.
Oh, crikey. Well, hold on to your hats, everybody. 10:48 is the time. And fair play to John in Sunbury for accepting the challenge. He's of the view that describing the words used by David Davis and Liam Fox is slagging them off. And he considers the House of Lords to be full of coffin dodgers, most of whom have been in the pay of the European Union. So we're going to go through the list of people in the House of Lords together, aren't we, John? And you're going to tell me the ones that are in the pay of the European Union or who have ever worked there or who have got pensions that they need to hang on to. And when we've gone through all of them, we'll count them up. I think it's about 785. Well, we'll check anyway. And you will then have proof that most of them are EU flunkies. So we'll start with the A's and work through, John, when you're ready, mate. Lord Aberdare, is he someone that has worked for the European Union or someone who has not? John? John? But, John, you were so adamant. What do you mean you hung up and we called you back 3 times after you promised that you'd do it and you refused to? What about Lord Adams or Baroness Adams of Craigley, John? Most of the House of Lords are paid by the EU. What about Lord Addington, John? John? Lord Adibawale? Lord Adonis? Baroness Afshar, John? Lord Agnew of Alton? John? Can we make sure he's all right? 10:53, I mean physically. Tom's in Cheltenham. Tom, what would you like to say?
Yes, good morning, James.
Hello, Tom.
I voted leave at the referendum, and I haven't got an issue at all with the Lords. I think they were just doing their job yesterday, and good on them for doing it. I think the real problem will come is if, when the vote actually happens in the Commons, and the 85% of the MPs who stood on the platform of coming out of the European Union, the Customs Union and the single market will vote...
See, I don't like that argument either. I understand why you make it, and I've had my fun for this.
But
it wasn't, though, was it? Because I voted for one of the 2 main parties, and I don't want to come out... No, but Tom, here's the thing. Tom, I know.
It was in the manifesto.
Yes, but
85%.
No, but
everybody should have voted Liberal Democrat if they think like you, James.
I voted for one of the 2 main parties, but I didn't vote to leave the customs union and the single market. So I'm just one person. I'm fairly confident, and I know that you know this, Tom, and I'm not going to insult you by asking why you're pretending not to. There's no earthly way that Theresa May went to the country to get a mandate for her Brexit plans and ended up with a reduced majority. You cannot use that as evidence that people wanted her to have an enhanced majority for her Brexit plans, can you, Tom?
Well, either you're saying the people who voted in the election...
no, Tom, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll tell you what I'll do. I've given you my example, right? I voted for one of the 2 main parties, and I did not vote to leave the customs union and the single market.
Well,
and
you should have withheld your vote.
That's fine. But now I'm just going to go randomly to the next caller. Joshua's in Coventry. Joshua, did you vote for one of the 2 main parties in the last general election?
I did, yes.
And did you vote to leave the customs union and the single market deliberately?
I was happy. When I voted leave, I was happy that might be an outcome.
So you specifically voted to leave the customs union and the single market in the last election?
In the last election? Well, yeah, I felt like that was one of the things the Conservatives did.
But Labour as well.
I was okay with that.
That's what Labour were promising. That's what Labour were promising as well.
Yeah, I would have probably voted Conservative anyway, which is your point.
And back to Tom.
Yeah, okay. Well, it was an expression of the will of the people.
But it wasn't, was it?
Yeah, it was.
But we've just shown that it wasn't, Tom. All I have to do is find people that voted for the Conservatives or Labour who want to remain in the European Union, and your whole point falls to pieces.
Well, they're charlatans then, aren't they? Because they shouldn't be standing on a manifesto that they don't believe in.
Well, you could say that, I suppose. And finally, why are you cross that Parliament has so much power?
I'm not cross. That's what I voted for. I mean, we've always got the Parliament Act, don't forget. The Lords is a revising chamber, and I voted leave because of what David Cameron said.
What was that?
Interested in... He basically said, if we vote to come out of the if you vote to come out of the European Union, you'll be coming out of the single market and the customs union.
But that was Project Fear. The people that you voted for told you that you wouldn't.
This is the man who put the proposition to
Yes, but that was Project Fear. No one ever cast a vote because they believed the people on the other side. You cast a vote because you believed the people on your side, and the people on your side said only a madman is talking about leaving the single market.
Mr.
Yes.
No, it is.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
not at all.
Well, I'm afraid it's true. David Davis said we'd be in Berlin the morning after the result. Owen Patterson said that only a madman would leave the single market. Daniel Hannan said absolutely nobody is talking about leaving the single market. But you cast your vote because you believed the people on the other side of the argument, not the people on your own side.
No, I didn't believe in our Prime Minister and what he was trying to sell me.
Oh, but you just said you voted for him because you did believe him.
No, I didn't believe...
So when he said we'd have to leave the customs union and the single market, you didn't believe him?
I didn't agree with his proposal to the British public.
So when he said we'd have to leave the customs union and the single market, you didn't believe him?
I believed him in that respect.
Oh, okay,
yes,
but not all the other respects.
Well, no, but I rejected the proposition that he was putting towards the British. Well, no.
Well, you didn't reject it, mate. You just rang me up to tell me that you believed him, Tom. Categorically, you just said, I believed David Cameron when he said we would have to leave the customs union and the single market. And in the same breath, you said you cast your vote because you didn't believe what David Cameron said. You didn't believe the proposition that he put to the British people.
I didn't believe in Project Fear.
Well, you did, though, Tom.
And I think many black people have chosen death. Slavery would not have lasted for so long, and I think that was the point. So I'm confused that there's a.
Well, let's get Richard. Let's get the professor. I'm interested in that, Professor. What would you say to my caller who's been hanging on the line for a while?
That last point that your caller just.
His name's Richard, by the way. Richard. Yeah.
Richard.
Yeah.
The last point that Richard made when he sought to clarify the sense in which he thinks Kanye West is right, I missed the reason for that.
Can you repeat that, Richard? You talked about the fact that they didn't have to do the work, they could choose.
Yeah, that was the point. I mean, Kanye didn't say that being abducted and put in boats was a choice. No. The fact that there was slavery for 400 years and the work was being done. Black people were a commodity. So if that commodity is not working, then they're no longer a commodity. So it's the fact that they were doing the work as slaves and carrying on as if everything was normal, that was the choice.
Yeah, Professor.
Do I have to reiterate that being a slave was not a choice? I mean, the fundamental difference between free labour and slave labour is, of course, that under conditions of free labour, you can choose not to work. You can go on strike. You can give up your job. I mean, you'll suffer consequences for it. But as slaves, of course, the meaning of slavery is that you did not have a choice to not work. There were all sorts of sanctions, including very, very severe ones, whippings,
lynching,
so on and so forth. I mean, slavery was a system based upon coercion. Does that really need
Richard, it is literally a choice of slave life or death, wasn't it, Richard?
Yeah, I think that the professor's missing the point completely. Under those circumstances, you choose death. It's simple. You do not choose slavery. You choose death. And for the professor to say, "Oh, well, at the end of the day, it was, there was harsh consequences," he's making it look like it was some sort of a job where they had to do it. Otherwise, no. You choose under those circumstances. You choose death. And
I wonder, Professor, lastly from you, it's quite a drastic reaction to enslavement. What are your comments on what Richard is suggesting?
Well, I just put it to your audience. I mean,
yes.
We were under those circumstances. Most people choose life. Some, of course, did rise up. The history of the US is also full, by the way, of slave rebellions.
Yes.
It's not a history of passive resignation and acceptance. It's just that those rebellions occurred under circumstances of overwhelming odds against them, were sometimes quite widespread, but were in all cases suppressed. So,
interesting. Thank you, Professor Sanjay Seth, Professor of Politics, Director of the Centre for Postcolonial Studies at Goldsmiths, University of London. Richard, so had it been you, God forbid, you would have chosen death?
Yes, and as the professor mentioned, there were quite a few slaves that chose death, Nat Turner being one of them. So, the professor is just completely, it's going over his head.
Well,
very bad.
Well, let's see what he said. Let's ask the audience, and we shall. Richard, thank you.
Adam thinks there's no problem. Adam in Paddington. Hello there.
Hello there. Thanks. Just a couple of points. Just a quick one on your previous caller. The NHS, since its foundation, GPs have been private contractors. So it's not new in terms of GPs being private. They always have been. They have a private contract. The on the aspect of what we're doing and this management of numbers, it's a bit of it's false. The BMA always say they need more people, more money, more. There was always more. The future of medicine and the way a lot of medicine is now going is going to be remote. So it's remote access, it's remote observation, remote prescription, and that you don't have to be a doctor in the UK to be able to get a remote diagnosis or remote prescription. There's certain things you need to go and see a GP for, but the future will be remote. So there's numbers.
But we're not just talking about GPs, we're talking about hospital doctors as well, where you need surgery or you need a diagnosis or you need hands-on treatment.
And this brings me to my second point. Really, is that what people miss with immigration is that when you ask for a foreign doctor to come to the UK because they're desperately needed for a department, they miss the point that whole families come, and then society picks up the cost for the whole family. Because the doctor, I saw the same program as you the other night. The post was for about £80,000 for that head and neck specialist. That physician can't pay enough in tax that would cover the cost of him being there to support a family of 3 or 4 whilst he's here. So unless you actually front it up and say, okay, we've got
80 grand couldn't support a family.
No, it won't pay enough in tax over the lifetime of supporting a family of 4 here.
Wow, you take a very stringent view of things, don't you? This is a needed... Well, hang on. There's a quid pro quo, isn't there, in place? There is a hospital that needs very rare or relatively rare and specific skills, and you would say, now wait until somebody called John Smith can do it. And ideally, if he's got no kids, even better.
No, I would say...
And an inheritance.
No, I would say you can come here from wherever you want. You come on your own and you have a 3-year working visa.
Oh, OK, Adam. You're all heart. Adam in Paddington.
Mark is in Bristol. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Iain. Good evening to you.
Hi, what would you like to say?
Well, I agree. He is a little bit of a communicator, and if some questions that he answered would have been answered honestly, it might have helped. One that I will bring issue, because one of the guys that you brought on asked a couple of the Brexit questions that I was going to ask Chucker, so obviously I didn't get to ask them. But he turned around and said the reason why he voted for Article 50 was because... and this is what he told everyone on your show, because it ought to be started, the process ought to have been started. Now, he only said that to appease all your listeners, so that was a bit deceitful, because about 3 months ago on Sky News, sorry to promote Sky News, but he actually said the reason why he voted for Article 50 was because he knew it could be changed. That's why he voted for it. Yeah, it was actually written, Article 50 was written by, forgetting one of the Liberal Lords. I can't remember who it was.
It's not, it was, I think, Lord Kerr, Sir John Kerr at the time. I don't think he's a Liberal Lord, I think he's a crossbencher.
I beg your pardon, sorry. I knew it was a Lord, well, one of the elite anyway. So, I mean, it was written by him, and as you know, Chucker's a lawyer, so he's obviously, read through it, and he said the reason why he voted for it, because he was pushed by Ridge, I think her name was, who was pushing him on it. He said, I voted for it because, having looked at it, I know it can be changed. So, I mean, why are you telling lies? I mean, that's another thing. Another one he said was about democracy. He said he's a Democrat. If he's a Democrat, he would do everything for the will of the people, which was, as you agree with as a Brexiteer yourself, that we voted to leave. Not partially leave, not pseudo leave, not sort of, well, we'll keep this bit or that bit. We voted to leave. So we are going. We've got to go. And what is happening now, and I'm absolutely fuming about this, is that all the remainers in the elite positions are thwarting it with everything they possibly can, and it's costing us a fortune. And they are giving the EU ammunition against us to build barriers for us leaving. It's ridiculous.
But if they genuinely believe, and clearly you don't, clearly I don't, if they genuinely believe that it's going to be a massive disaster for this country, that they wouldn't be, they couldn't look themselves in the mirror in the morning if they didn't speak out against it. Now, at least with Chukwuemeka, you do get an honest answer from him. He's completely open about what he's trying to do. He wants to stop Brexit. It's all of these others that don't actually admit that they say, oh, no, we perfectly
perfectly accept the vote of the British people, and they say but, and you then know what's coming. But they will never actually come out and say, we are using everything we can to stop it. He's honest, isn't he?
Well, apart from the two bits that I brought up, yes. But and that's only a short speech I've heard from him. But I agree with you, Iain. I agree with a lot of things you say, but I agree with you to a certain degree. But we should be held. These should be held to account for what they are costing us as a country.
Well,
our standing is going down.
In the end, all politicians have to be held to account for what they do when they're in office, whether they're in the government or the opposition or just backbench MPs. They can all be held to account at the next election. But as he said, his constituency had the highest Remain vote in the whole country. So he would argue that he's actually voting in the interests of his constituents. Mark, thank you.
Let's go to Yarmouth and speak to Mark. Good evening, Mark.
Hello, Nigel. I have spoken to you before.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my call. If I was in Theresa May's Brexit war cabinet, whatever you want to call it, I would have told her by now that she needs, you either get out of this altogether, the EU, or we walk. And she's made a mockery of it, Nigel, and I don't know, I've been following it now closely for quite some time. It's gone too far, and, there's one idea after another is, going backwards and forwards. Do we go here? Do we stay here? Do we go in for this? We've got the House of Lords who are unelected.
Yep.
Going against the will of the people. We've had numerous High Court cases against it. We've had people, if you watch any of the major news channels, all you're getting on there is Remainers. You're hardly getting any Brexit. I mean,
Can you imagine, Mark? Can you imagine, Mark? Had the result been 52-48 the other way, we wouldn't be seeing any of this, would we? Can you imagine, Mark? Can you imagine, Mark? Had the result been 52-48 the other way, we wouldn't be seeing any of this, would we?
Now, this is where we're going to get to call, because it was an interview with the Mirror, as I recall, Nigel, ahead of the referendum.
Yeah.
They quote you as saying that if the result was 52-48 in favour of Remain, that you would want a second referendum.
Can you imagine, Mark? Can you imagine, Mark? Had the result been 52-48 the other way, we wouldn't be seeing any of this, would we?
No, of course not. It would be, we'd have probably been drawing up plans now to join the Euro. I said to people that I know that had we had lost, had we not come out and had we gone in, it would have been, I suppose, it would have been a decision, that we would have had to accept. And we would have just said to them, we better make the best of it then, get inside Europe, fight our corner. If we are going to join the Euro, then we're going to have to fight our corner and, make the best of it, Nigel. But because it's gone the other way, they seem...
And we're not making the best of it, Mark. We're not making the best of it. And there's an air of negativity about everything, isn't there?
Well, of course there is, because this is huge, you see, and they can't handle this decision, and they've kind of got together like spoilt children and thrown their dummies out the pram and basically...
Mark, just to finish, I've got a load of callers want to come on this, but this is your platform. Message to Mrs May from Mark in Yarmouth.
Well, you either accept the will of the British people, otherwise resign now and go.
OK, that couldn't be clearer. Mark, I thank you.
Paul is in Guildford. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Iain. Can I just start by saying I've listened to you over the years, and I think you're an extremely fair broadcaster. I live partly in America and partly in the UK. I've followed Donald Trump's campaign. I was there for all the primaries, and I believe that he will go down in history as one of America's great presidents. I have to also say that whilst I support him strongly, I'm totally against all his misogynistic views and all the things that go on with various women. But I truly believe he should be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize because he's the only American president that has managed to get North Korea to the negotiation table, which I think is a superb...
Well, how much do you think it really was down to him?
Well, I think he's in the background orchestrating things, and his background is not as a politician but as a businessman, and he's written The Art of the Deal. Negotiation is his strong point and has been the key point of his life. So I believe very strongly that he's in the background making decisions that has definitely influenced North Korea, because just a few months ago there was going to be a potential war, and now miraculously we've got Kim actually going to go to the negotiation table, which is a miracle, because I was living in fear, as we all were, that there were going to be missiles raining down on the United States and Europe.
Well, I must admit, if you'd said to me at the beginning of the year, right, you've got £1,000 to bet on either there being some sort of war over North Korea this year, or there's going to be peace breaking out, I know where my £1,000 would have gone, and it wouldn't have been on the latter.
Exactly. So you're in agreement with me?
Up to a point. I'm not sure that I would attribute so much of this to Donald Trump as you are. I think that there have been other players here too, particularly President Xi in China. I think that if you remember when Kim Jong-un visited him recently on that green train that was seen arriving in Beijing, I suspect... And I mean, I don't think anybody knows this yet, but I suspect when the history books are written of this period, that meeting will be seen as quite crucial to this.
Yes, I fully agree with you. I wouldn't rule out China whatsoever in any way, but I think China has listened to Donald Trump very much, and China has had it in its best interest to sort out North Korea, but only due to the pressure from Trump in the background.
OK, Paul, thank you very much indeed for that. Jazz is in Crawley. Hello, Jazz.
Hi, Iain. I certainly think Donald Trump deserves it, the Nobel Peace Prize, along with President Xi, purely for this reason that North and South Korea have only had a truce since 1953. And all the successive presidents since then haven't really done much about that. So we've just got to wait for this meeting in 3 weeks' time to, to actually confirm that this is exactly what's going to take place, a denuclearization of North Korea and peace with South Korea. And I think it would be well-deserved. And we should keep away from, anything that's going to distract that, because it's monumental. It's absolutely fantastic as far as I'm concerned.
Well, if it happens, it would certainly be monumental. You're absolutely right on that. Jazz, thank you very much indeed.
The General Secretary of UKIP, Paul Oakley, has just tweeted, about to go on at BBC R4 today to get duffed up over the local election results. Well, here he is. Morning, Mr. Oakley.
Good morning. You missed out the bit on the end. I also said, bring it, hashtag. So come on, give it your best shot.
Well, there's no need, is there? Because I'm sure you're going to be candid, open, honest, and say that UKIP have had a disastrous night.
The thing I'm most astonished by is the fact that the media are pretending to be shocked about this. We were never going to do brilliantly in these elections. We knew that. We'd accepted that some time ago.
Well, brilliantly you're quite a long way from brilliantly, aren't you?
Well, we are, but we're a small party, and we've had a couple of big shocks in the recent past. Our former leader, he ought to have been campaigning for the local elections at the autumn as soon as he became elected. He didn't. That's one of the reasons we got rid of him. And another big hit that we got, a court ordered that we pay £175,000 to 3 Labour MPs.
Sure. But in this spirit of openness and honesty, if it's not brilliantly, how do you describe returning just 2 councillors and getting less than 1.5% of the national vote share?
Well, for example, if we'd been able to spend that £175,000...
No, I want a word. What is it if it's not brilliantly?
Well, look, you can only... No, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to slag off our party. Come on. If we'd had the money to campaign, we'd have done a lot better. But look, we're never going to take over councils all over the country. 4 years ago was our high point.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I tell you what, people are interested in Brexit. There's an awful lot of anger. I've been talking to...
Well, why aren't they voting for you then?
why are they voting for us? Well, simply because we're not in government. The Conservatives are in government. And there is a strong probability that Theresa May is going to betray Brexit, but they're the best option at the moment.
Isn't it time to say it's all over for UKIP? You did your job. I mean, you will have a very large chapter in a rather important book about the history of Britain, but it's over.
No, it's not over at all. I mean, think of the Black Death in the Middle Ages. It comes along and it causes disruption, and then it goes dormant, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Our time isn't finished because Brexit is being betrayed. And
Can I just clarify, as General Secretary of UKIP, you've just compared your party with the Black Death?
Absolutely. What's wrong with that?
Well, it's responsible for the deaths of many hundreds of thousands of people, might be one reason to hesitate about the metaphor.
It also led to economic growth and the Renaissance, but this isn't a history lesson. It's just an analogy, a little soundbite for Radio 4.
Well, just give us one aspect of the Black Death you'd like to emulate.
Well, it got rid of the whole issue of servitude, basically, and it allowed people to go into the towns, escape their landlords, and create their own businesses, that sort of thing. I don't want to stretch it too far, though.
No need to beat you up at all, as you said in your tweet, but we're delighted you gave us that soundbite. UKIP are like the Black Death. Thank you for joining us.
I know he's a moron.